In this Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous video, I want to discuss what is the best class for you, or how to choose a class if you're new to the game. Now that Wrath of the Righteous has finally released in full, a lot of people have been asking the questions, what class should I play, and what is the best class for me? While it's not an easy question to answer, there are some ways you can narrow it down. A big shout out to Epic Games for sponsoring this video. If you guys are picking up Wrath of the Righteous this week or next week, make sure you use our creator code Fextralife in the Epic Games Store if you plan on getting it there to help support the channel. Much like any RPG and Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, the first thing you'll need to do in character creation is select your class. How to decide which class to choose can be extremely overwhelming, even for veterans of the franchise, but the first thing you should probably do is think about what sort of character you want to play. That is to say, do you want to play a mage character, or a warrior, or a rogue, or some sort of archer? Or maybe you want to play a mix of 2 or 3 of these types of playstyles. Regardless of what the answer is, figuring that out is your first step. Once you've decided which style of gameplay you prefer, then you can scroll through the classes of Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous and look at the pre-made build balance of each. This will show you what the class focuses on, whether it's melee combat, ranged combat, magic, support, defense, or control. Most classes have a mix of these, but some focus far more on 1 or 2 of these aspects. Once you've narrowed this down to about 2 or 3 classes, you can also have a look at the difficulty of the class to get an idea how challenging it might be to play. This is not 100% accurate, meaning some classes might be easier for you or harder than what is listed there, but it should give you a rough idea if you can handle it or not based on your experience. This should help isolate the class you want to play, but regardless of whether it does or doesn't, the next step you should do is read the descriptions of these classes and spend some time looking over their archetypes. Archetypes are for all intents and purposes subclasses of a specific class with many of the same features and abilities that make up the identity of each class. However, some fundamentally change the way some classes are played, while others simply focus on one aspect of the class, making it a bit stronger. A great example of this is the Nature Mage archetype of Arcanist, which completely changes the spell list from Arcanist to Druid. This is a significant change as it essentially allows you to play a character that operates in the space between an Arcanist and a Druid. You get to use Druid spells while maintaining all other class features of the Arcanist. Conversely, the Brown Fur Transmuter archetype of Arcanist simply empowers transmutation spells while sacrificing a few Arcanist class features. And though this does change the way you play Arcanist, it's not nearly as significant of a change as the Nature Mage. So look over the archetypes carefully of the 1 or 2 classes you've narrowed things down to and see if anything jumps out to you. Don't be afraid to try one out and start over if you decide it's not the one. Maybe your first choice was close to what you want, but not exactly, and there's no shame in that. In this section, I'd like to provide you with some of the classes that I think are rather easy to play or a lot of fun for a new player. I'll try to factor in the new classes from Wrath of the Righteous that were not present in Kingmaker as well, so you can get the full experience. Martial classes are those that almost exclusively rely on weapons for their damage with little or no magic use. A few martial classes I think are great to play that are not too hard to learn are Cavalier, Fighter, Ranger, and Slayer. Cavaliers excel at mounted combat, so if you like to ride a giant beast around and smack things in the face, then this might be the class for you. Cavaliers are not particularly good at ranged combat, so you'll be playing almost exclusively melee when playing one. They do, however, offer a modest amount of buffs you can enhance your group with, so they do have some support capabilities. Fighters are well-rounded warriors who can attack from range or in melee combat. Depending on how you set yours up, you can be full melee, full range, or a mix of these two. They also have excellent defense, making them hard to kill while still dealing out decent damage. They can also fulfill the tank role if you don't have one. Rangers share a lot in common with fighters, and they can excel at ranged or melee combat as well. Depending on how you set yours up, you can specialize in one type or be decent at both, just like the fighter. However, Rangers can also gain an animal companion, just like Cavaliers, which can assist them in combat. Slayers excel at both ranged and melee combat, allowing you the flexibility to choose how you want to play. They deal sneak attack damage just like the Rogue class, but they also gain Slayer talents, providing them even more benefits. They study their target and deal increased damage against them, making them fantastic against hard-to-kill enemies. Mage classes are those that cast some type of spells, whether it's offensive, defensive, or healing. Mages cover all of these classes. Some classes I think are generally fun to play that fall under this category are Arcanist, Druid, and Sorcerer. Arcanists are similar to Sorcerers and Wizards and have a similar spell list to these 2 classes. However, they have a class feature that lets them use spell-like abilities called Arcane Exploits that provides them with more ways to damage their enemies. Arcane Exploits can also increase their armor class or allow them to teleport and cast in the same turn. If you like a little more variety than just a straightforward spellcaster, give Arcanist a try. The Druid class is one of the less complicated spellcasters in Wrath of the Righteous, but it has a lot it can do. They excel at summoning, and they often have an animal companion that can assist them. They can also transform into animals if they wish, allowing them to melee effectively on the battlefield. Sorcerers are pretty straightforward spellcasters, but they do have something special about them that sets them apart from others, and that is a bloodline. If you ever wanted to sprout wings and turn into a dragon while flinging spells in between transformations, you may enjoy this class. There are several bloodlines to choose from, and it can be difficult to pick one, but it's what makes this class so unique and interesting in my opinion. Hybrid classes are those that mix spells and martial abilities together to create a class that does a bit of each. Some classes I think you might enjoy are Paladin, Magus, and Blood Rager. Paladins, believe it or not, can cast spells, but they don't gain them until several levels into the game, and they don't gain very many. Still, they are sort of a hybrid class that excels in melee combat, and one that can heal itself and allies in addition to dealing damage or tanking. Paladins are exceptionally strong characters, and if you're looking for a blend of melee, healing, and buffs, and some spells, then they are a great option. Magus are a mix of melee and offensive magic that is very unique. Not only can they buff their weapons' damage via their Arcane Pool class feature, they can also imbue some of their weapon attacks with spells, allowing them to cast a spell and attack in the same turn. They also attack wearing some armor while casting, making them harder to kill. Blood Ragers are essentially a mix of barbarians and sorcerers. Not only do you get to select a bloodline like a sorcerer, but you can rage just like a barbarian, and at later levels you can buff yourself with sorcerer spells by activating Blood Rage. You'll use less offensive spells than a Magus if you select this class, but you'll be able to buff yourself substantially. You can play barbarians ranged or melee, so there is some flexibility here. Multiclassing is not something you should be super concerned with as a new player, and putting it out of your mind is a good idea until you become more familiar with Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. Many classes get more powerful by taking levels in that specific class, and when that stops happening, you can accidentally gimp your character. Additionally, you'll stop gaining more powerful spells if you originally chose a spellcasting class, and you start taking levels in a different class. It's much better to find the archetype that fits your needs instead until you have a better handle on things. Multiclassing is a lot of fun, but it's very hard to get right without a decent understanding of game mechanics, which might take a while. Similarly, prestige classes are essentially other classes you can select, but they have specific requirements that must be met before you can choose them. Without some prior planning, you might not meet the requirements for the ones that fit best with your build, and it's hard to plan if you're new to the game. The same problem with multiclassing applies to prestige classes as well, so you have to make sure you're gaining more than you're losing by selecting one. Some prestige classes still count towards your first class when it comes to spells, however, making this less of a negative in some cases. Still, I advise against worrying about prestige classes until you've played the game a decent amount. Games like Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous are meant to be played many times, not only because of different story-related options, but also because of the enormous amount of class variety and potential party setups with various companions. Final thoughts. Character creation in Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous can take you a long time, if not hours, and it's quite fun to theorycraft new builds and ideas. However, getting into the game world and gaining some real knowledge and experience will go a long way towards making your future builds better, so don't take too long before giving something a go. I've made some recommendations of classes I think are fun and not overly complicated to learn, and I advise you give one of these a whirl if you're new or looking for something a little bit different than just a wizard or a rogue. I've tried to suggest classes that were not present in Kingmaker where I could, so that you can take full advantage of one of the best parts of Wrath of the Righteous. Narrow down what you want to play between a couple of classes and look for archetypes that sound interesting and give one of those a try. Some trial and error may be needed here, but this should help put you in the ballpark. If you guys are interested in a full and comprehensive class guide going through all the classes and archetypes, please let me know in the comments below. I did put together about 5 videos of this from the beta, but if that's something you guys would like, please let me know because I won't do one otherwise, and that is a big undertaking. And remember to use our content creator code Fextralife on the Epic Game Store if you get the game there and help support the channel. Stay tuned for more Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous guides, including builds, and be sure to check out the official Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous wiki if you have more questions about the game.